top of these issues. So the purpose of today's panel session is to bring together top experts, business leaders who are at the height of their professions and who share the same passion for leadership matters, and to share their own personal experience with us. And our goal is that you will leave here having learned about leadership behaviors that will improve your organizational performance, that will fuel innovation, and will provide you with that competitive edge that you need in navigating through this crisis. We're extremely lucky to have snagged a wonderful moderator, Moky Makura, and she'll be anchoring today's proceedings. Moky is the Executive Director of Africa No Filter, a donor collaborative focused on shifting the African narrative. She's also a former South Africa country representative for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I also have a couple of fun facts about Moky. She's totally vegan, and when she gets a mic in her hand, she can't help wanting to sing. And she's been known to burst into song at unexpected moments, so you have fair warning. And now, before I bring on the panel, I'd like to invite the President of the Institute of Directors, Nigeria, Chief Chris Okunowo, to provide his welcome remarks.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. It's very nice. Can you hear me? But Mrs. Bola, can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
Yes, I think people can hear. I think people can hear.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Makura. Oh, Nneka. Well, our distinguished ladies and gentlemen, panelists, and our moderator, I am simply delighted on behalf of the Governing Council of the Institute of Directors, Nigeria, to welcome you all to this edition of a webinar series with the theme, Women, Leadership and Innovation in a Crisis. I also especially welcome our distinguished panelists and moderator. I have Dr. Nneka Abulokwe, OBE, Chief Executive Officer of Micromarket, Mrs. Yimika Adeboye, MD and Chief Executive of Cadbury Nigeria PLC, Mrs. Adenike Ogunlesi, Founder, Ruffle and Campbell, a non-executive director of Lafarge Africa PLC, Mr. Of course, our own, Mr. Austin Okere, Fellow of the Institute of Directors, Founder of CWG PLC, and also Leadership Academy. Of course, moderator today, Mrs. Moky Makura, Executive Director, Africa No Filter, TV presenter, author, publisher, and entrepreneur. It is wonderful to know that this team of professionals will share with us today decades of experience as they are highly skilled corporate executives, versatile business leaders with several years of working in various sectors of the economy. I also wish to welcome all other eminent personalities, our guests, our associates and friends of our great institute to this very event. I thank you all for coming to share experiences and contribute meaningfully to this discourse. As part of our measures taken by the Institute to continue to operate and realize its mission and vision without contravening the lockdown and social distancing guidelines by government, we have deliberately adopted e-platforms such as this to provide services and remain relevant to the scheme of things. I'm therefore particularly elated to add that the theme of this event has been carefully chosen to reflect on the impact of COVID-19, which the entire world is contending with at this moment. At the corporate level, the presents complex and interconnected challenges for business leaders, especially women, as they contemplate how to prepare for the inevitable recession and disrupted business continuity. Ladies and gentlemen, research has shown that there is a female leadership advantage during an organizational crisis, and that when you have more women in leadership roles in an organization, it seems to increase creativity and innovation, which have key transformational factors in crisis response. It is for this reason that we have deemed it necessary to hold this event to facilitate wider and deeper engagements and express the benefits therein with all stakeholders in order to generate greater ideas that would enable us to take full advantage of women involvement in such a time as this, of our businesses and our nation in general. This webinar will examine leadership behaviors which are adopted frequently by women and how they improve performance in organizations battling to emerge from a crisis. It is also expected that there will be a deep dive into how women leadership behaviors provide a competitive edge and fuel innovation during and after the crisis. More so, this event should strike a balance between what should change now and after the containment of the pandemic and provide business leaders with practical advice on the types of leadership behaviors that will improve organizational performance, fuel innovation, and provide competitive edge in navigating through the crisis, among others. Distinguished directors, leaders, business leaders, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to accordingly encourage all of us to be open-minded and participate actively in this webinar so as to take advantage of the enormous wealth of experience of our panelists and moderator. I thank the chairman and members of the Women's Directors Development Committee of the Institute, as well as the management of the Secretariat for organizing this webinar. I thank you all for your attention. I wish you fruitful deliberations. Please continue to keep safe and healthy during this perilous period of the pandemic in our country. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Bola, should I take over from here?
I think you should. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity to moderate this panel, which is about women leadership, innovation in a crisis. Just thank you very much for your kind introduction to me. But I just want to be clear to everybody that this is not necessarily just a conversation about women, and it's not a conversation about women getting into leadership. You know, there's a saying, or it's a curse, as some believe, that is typically attributed to the Chinese, that may we live in interesting times. I think we can all agree that today, more than any other time, we are living in interesting times. But the challenge with interesting times is that they imply uncertainty and fear, and in this case, death. But they're also the most creative of any time in the history of mankind. This COVID-19 pandemic has had significant human, economic, and social impact across the world. And world leaders are grappling with leading through this crisis. But a handful of countries are being credited with handling things differently. Female world leaders are, and I'm going to quote from an article, disproportionately represented to a rather startling degree among countries managing the crisis well. And it's New Zealand's Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, Denmark's Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, and the Finnish Prime Minister. They have all been lauded as all handling their COVID response in a way that has attracted the world's attention, and to be honest, has left some of our male world leaders, mention no names, way behind. As a result, there have been a flurry of articles on women's leadership and an analysis of what it is about women's leadership styles that is particularly working in these unprecedented times. And it actually begs the question, are women leaders better in a crisis? So, I mean, there's been a number of studies that have recognized that women are generally better equipped to navigate some kind of crises. could have a lot to do with the fact that we deal with daily crises with our children almost every day. But there seems to be an advantage with having female leadership in your organization. But let me reiterate what I said at the beginning. This is not a session about gender and about putting women in leadership positions in your organization. Because if you haven't got that memo yet, well, I think it's a bit late. But this is a discussion about leadership. And it's a discussion that's looking at examples of where things are working in leadership. So we're drawing out leadership lessons from a group of women that seem to have been doing it rather well. After all, we've seen courses, and I personally have attended a course and read books about lessons from leadership from animals, from ants, from eagles, from lions. I definitely attended one on leadership lessons from lions once. So absolutely, why not women? So with the help of this esteemed panel, which has been introduced to you, we're going to unpack leadership behaviors and a little more about how they improve performance in organizations, particularly the ones battling to emerge from this crisis. But before I do that, and I introduce the panel a little bit more and I want to take you through what we're expecting today. So I believe there's about 500 people on this call. So I think that's an amazing turnout. And it's a testament to the fact that people are really concerned and are looking for a way to get through this crisis. One of the things that we are going to do, and we're going to have a series of them through this session, is we're going to start with a quick poll to actually understand how COVID is affecting you. There'll be another 2 polls during the session, and I'm going to kick that off in a minute. And then I will introduce the panel, then we'll open it up to questions in the last sort of 30 minutes. Just a little bit of information about the way the questions work for those of us who haven't been on too many of these webinars. First of all, don't use the chat box for your questions. That's just for chat and everybody can see that. Please type in your question into the Q&A prompt, which should be on the button somewhere on your screen. You put your name and your organization, and don't forget to put who you want to answer the question, and I'll read the question out during the session and I'll attribute it to you if you put your name in there. And I will apologize now because we may not get to all the questions. It's on a first come, first serve basis. So I'm apologizing in advance. So I think we should start with the first live poll. If you launch that one, you'll see the question on your screen coming up. So you just need to press submit. It's a very simple question. This is an opportunity for us to understand within the organizations do you work from, which part of your business has been most impacted by COVID. So you should see something coming up on your screen now. And the actual question is, where has the COVID impact been greatest in your organization? Can everyone see that? Has that been launched? Okay. I'm going to ask our tech guy. Has somebody launched the poll? No, I can see a lot of people telling me no. Okay, I'm going to ask our tech guy to do that and just alert me, and maybe we'll do it after we've started. So think about the answer. So we've already introduced the panel, but I'm just going to quickly say a couple of things about them. You know, obviously we've got Dr. Nneka Abulokwe, who is an OBE. She was recently awarded that distinction by the Queen. So she's UK based. She's one of the leading ladies of Africa, the 100 most inspiring women in 2020. And she's the first Black female board member of a multinational tech company in the UK. I think it's really amazing. So she will be giving us, you know, as well as being a Nigerian, she is working and based in the UK, and just some of the things that she's seeing there and her experience there. Our second panelist is Yimika Adeboye, who's the managing director of Cadbury Nigeria. She was also the chief financial officer and director of finance at the Nigerian Bottling Company. She's a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, and a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Nigeria. She is a board member of her family's philanthropic foundation, which has been set up for the purpose of providing educational and industrial development to Nigeria's youth. She's passionate about mentoring, but the great thing about her, and if you wonder where she gets her energy from, is that she gets up every day at 4 o'clock to run 3 times a week. I'm impressed. Our third panelist is Adenike Ogunlesi, who is the founder and chief responsibility officer of Rough and Tough, which is a premium and children's clothing brand and probably one of the most enduring in Nigeria. She's been in the industry for over 35 years, and it's a business that spans fashion clothing, school and corporate uniforms, medical apparel, and retailing. She's got 17 retail stores nationwide. She is an entrepreneur. She's on various boards, and she also is an avid gardener. She absolutely loves nature. And our final panelist, and he is like the odd one out because he's the only one that's not female, is Austin Okere, who has been introduced already. He's the founder of CWG PLC and the also Leadership Academy, which mentors businesses and entrepreneurs for geometric growth. Austin has got numerous recognitions and a Lifetime Entrepreneurship Achievement Award by the American University of Nigeria. He also received Nigeria Computer Society's Special Presidential Award and was named ICT Personality of the Year and ICT Man of the Decade by ICT Watch. So his company was recognized as a global growth company by the World Economic Forum, and it's the largest security listing in the technology sector of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. In his free time, he supports an internally displaced camp that has adopted some of the children and puts them through school to tertiary level. And that's my panel. So we're going to start with some questions, unless the poll is ready to go. Is the poll ready to go? Okay, let's launch the poll. All right, okay, the poll should be on your screens now. So the questions are, where has the COVID impact been greatest in your organization? So we've probably got 3 questions, 3 answers: financial performance, operations and staff morale. Okay, it seems operations and financial. I'm going to stop. Has everybody been able to submit their answers? I'm going to stop and share the results so you can actually see how this is affecting companies largely in Nigeria. So as you can probably all see now, the biggest impact from COVID has actually been clearly on financial performance, but it's not by a huge margin. Operations of most companies have been adversely affected, but I think the least one, which maybe is surprising because some of the people in organizations I've talked to, is that the staff morale has probably been the least affected, or maybe we just haven't asked enough of the questions. But enough of me talking now, because you're not necessarily here to hear me speak. I want to start actually with our panelists, and I'm going to throw this first question up to Nneka actually, and I just want to understand, and I'm going to ask the same question to all the panelists, really, what has been the impact of COVID on your businesses, because you are all business leaders. Nneka, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
It's a pleasure to be here, yes. And the impact has been multifaceted. It started off in March, and we felt the winds of change blowing from the east to the UK. I'm situated in the UK. And for me, I run a consultancy as well as serving on board. So the impact has been multidimensional. And what I found was that first and foremost, I had several international engagements, and slowly but steadily, those international engagements began to be canceled, okay? And that was the first realization that this was bigger than just a UK problem. In the UK, as I serve on boards and part of the leadership of organizations, the first thing that started to happen was organizations started to prepare, and they say preparedness is the first part of success, and then started to dust off their business continuity plans. And because I also, my work is heavily in tech, understanding what technology infrastructure was required in order to see this through. So organizations started putting their business continuity plans in place, looking at their technology infrastructure. But also, one thing that became very, very apparent was people. There was a global connected feeling, a social consciousness of self and other. I mean, people were worried. Everybody was worried. People started to reach out. And what we found in the business world was that the focus became more about people. There was a shift from business operations to general welfare of people. So this was very, very different, and it has hit the industry very different. I'll give you a very quick case study. A colleague of mine who works in crisis management in Europe, in Belgium, works for a hospital, and then called me up and said, I work with a hospital, and believe it or not, they have a pandemic plan. And I was like, wow. And I'm saying, wow, I'm sure people were very impressed by that. And he said to me, 45 minutes into enacting their pandemic plan, they had to put the plan aside because it wasn't relevant and it wasn't fit for purpose. Now that shows the enormity of and the gravity of the issue. So that is actually a healthcare, a government institution that as part of their business continuity had to have these plans in place, but these plans did not work. They had to put these plans aside and start to act immediately. So it has affected in very multidimensional in terms of self, other, corporation, and also globally.
Nneka, thanks for that. I want to move to Yimika now because obviously you're running of Cadbury's. Just curious because Nneka, you said that staff morale in the UK was something that was prioritized, and from the results of the polling, we're not seeing that necessarily in Nigeria. But so Yimika, I'm curious to know just what is the biggest impact COVID has had on your business, on Cadbury's?
Thank you, Moky. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, IoD, for having me here. First, if somebody told me a year ago when I was appointed as MD of Cadbury that I'll be dealing with something like this, I'd laugh off my seat and say things like that don't happen. If somebody had told me in business school that this was something that would happen, I would say, wow, it's a nice case study. But I'm living a case study today, myself and the team at Cadbury. It's really very interesting because, again, like Nneka said, when this started and we were watching this on TV, we all thought, well, this is out there. It's not going to come to Nigeria. But being part of a global entity, we had some preparation in place because obviously our business in China, which is the biggest actually in my region, had already started experiencing the impact of COVID. So we're fortunate enough to begin to put in a few plans in place. Also because we're in the food industry, there's some protocol, there's a lot of protocol that we go through that has become relevant today that isn't too strange for us, hand sanitizers, nose mask, all those things we have to use in quite a lot of places in our factory. So a few of those things didn't matter. Biggest hit for us actually is in sales. Our business, we sell in the open markets. Open markets is about 70% of our business. A lockdown means no open markets. So that's 70% of my turnover gone overnight. And being a business leader, for me, my most important asset are my people. So how do I make sure that the people, the team, two things are safe? And secondly, we carry on running some business so that people don't start losing their jobs, because that's really the natural next steps. So it's just thinking out of the box and trying to see how we work this out. Now, Lagos State had been very good to us. As a manufacturer, they allowed us to carry on producing. So on the manufacturing side, the impact wasn't really there because all we had to do was make sure people got to work safely, the shifts were running safely. But on the sales side, it's actually how do we go out there and sell to people who ordinarily will come to markets and the markets are shut. So thinking out of the box and trying to do things differently became a massive, massive, big challenge for us at the onset. But having a versatile and agile team has been really good. So we had to start thinking out of the box. No open markets, 30% retail. How do you get to people? People still want to eat. People still have to eat even in the lockdown. So how do we get food to people? That's really what we had to, that was the initial impact. It wasn't really about people. And when I saw the poll, I'm not surprised because even in our business, we look after people. I mean, like I said, they're our biggest asset. So, you know, once people feel you care for them, they'll do anything for them. So we did little things like setting up WhatsApp group called check-in groups, where team leaders always checked in on all their team members every day. You know, so it's not about, you know, just go to work. First thing in the morning, you check everyone, are you all okay? They send a message with a thumbs up, I'm fine. If we don't see a thumbs up by midday, you call the person. I haven't heard from you, are you okay? It works.
No, thank you for that, Nneka. Let me move on to how a large, you know, multinational versus an entrepreneurial organization like yours, Nneka. You know, how has COVID affected you, and what have you been able to do with your business to contribute to the effort?
The reaction is pretty much the same, because when you think whether it's a big corporation or whether it's a smaller business, the elements that run all of them are all the same, and people is a fundamental part of that. And so when we realized that we needed to close down, 95% of our income from our retail business comes from our stores, our 17 stores, which needed all to close down. We didn't have any contract manufacturing work. We were just manufacturing for our stores. So that also, the Gatimo apparel that manufactures for Rough and Tumble also went on lockdown. So really, it was a bit of it wasn't a small nightmare, it was a major nightmare. But the first thing was, I realized that it was a crisis, and people were going to respond whichever way I responded as a leader. And so the first thing we did was to divide the entire organization into groups, where people who live within a certain bus stop would have a coordinator who would call everybody and make sure that everybody was fine. Each team lead also set up a WhatsApp group, because they then started having Zoom meetings so we could stay connected, and so we could talk about the crisis as well as how you're doing, as well as work, so that we don't totally disconnect, because reconnecting will become a bigger problem because nobody knew how long this was going to go on for. So the people, for me, was fundamental, because when everything calms down, it's the people you're going to need to make the money again. So from what Yimika says, when you look after the people, they will do anything for you. And I saw that firsthand this time. The day before the lockdown, we bought, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of food stuff, which we shared down and sent to all of our staff in Port Harcourt, in Abuja, in Kano, and in Lagos. And I think that was the best thing we ever did as an organization, because the message sent to them was, we care about you, we're all in this together, we know that the markets are going to shut down, you may not have been able to buy food, you may not have enough money to buy enough food, so here's rice, here's beans, here's gari, here's oil, literally did food packs that were sent to everybody. And for me as a leader, I think that was one of the best decisions I ever made. Because when it came down to now calling my people that, look, there's an opportunity here to make masks. Are you willing to come out to do it? Nobody ever said no. People walked two hours because there were no cars on the road to get here, so we could even begin to make the samples to see, is this possible or is it not possible? Then we because it was now an essential item, we then got all the passes that allowed us then to get people in to begin to produce them. But even with that, we needed to get a caterer who was cooking for about 350 people every day. Then we needed to get a bus. So we have a whole load of buses that pick people up according to the bus stops to bring them to work, so that, you know, you limit contamination, you limit them going out to look for food. So everything they needed was within this space. Was it expensive? Yes, it was expensive. It cost more than we thought it would. But the thing was that we got working again. And that boosted everybody's morale. To see that even within the context that we're in, a crisis, there are possibilities, because we say we're an organization that creates possibilities, that believes in possibilities. So this was such a good example for the morale of our staff as well, to see that who we say we are was able to come alive when we were faced with a crisis. So for me, people will always be the bridge between your products and your customers. So they always have to be number one. You know, so our bottom line, yes, our sales are hit badly, but because we had this other opportunity, for now, we're finding new ways of doing new things and getting on with it, you know. So that's,
I think it's amazing that you were able to turn your business around and start producing these the masks. I think that's amazing. So let me bring in Austin here, because obviously you also will have been impacted. I'd love to hear your experience.
Thanks very much. Nneka, you're right. I mean, the Chinese use the same expression for challenge and opportunity, because both of them are two sides of the same coin. Yeah. Undoubtedly, the pandemic brought severe challenges, but also unique opportunities. So if I talk about my two businesses, CWG had been experimenting with remote working, not because of the pandemic, but because of traffic, waste of man hours in traffic. So they had a roster system of who comes in the office and who works from remote. So they had definitely perfected the art of business continuity through remote. And when the pandemic hit, they already had the action plan with very minimal modification. They got a tailwind, because at the end of the day, people still need services. Moky, you were talking about people still need food, they need services. Mm-hmm. And if the company is not available, even if it's the best service provider, service, they will go to who can provide the service and is providing it. And so that tailwind is taking CWG to become what I call a net gainer from the pandemic. There are also going to be net losers, obviously, in the aviation. But in between, there's a whole spectrum, and you find those that are resilient, like the banks, neither net gainers nor net losers. If I take the Also Leadership Academy, for instance, we had always wanted to reach more people. We bring people into the academy and we impact them. So this will be entrepreneurs and business leaders. But they come in batches of 25 if they are a work group from a company, or 40 if it, but at the end of the day, we want to reach more people than we could bring into the academy. And we were grappling with that when we saw what was happening in the UK. So they were ahead of us on the curve. And immediately we saw that already we had our curriculum digitized. We had our shared files. We just didn't have the willpower to try it out. And when the pandemic hit, we started doing webinars or online virtual impact. And people were waiting to hear some message of hope. We were all like rabbits that were caught in the glare of the headlights of a car. And many people said, well, you snapped us out of our COVID inactivity into doing something. We have to show up. We have to show up at our best. We have to show up at our best consistently, no matter what. So what has happened inadvertently is that the opportunity has happened for ALA to now take impact virtually and reach more people. So in both my organizations, we've got the tailwinds following us, and we are net gainers.
So let me just keep the question on you, because with your leadership training hat on, can you talk a little bit about these leadership qualities that women are supposed to have, that you feel that are working really well in this time of crisis? What are the key ones?
Moky, I think that if you look, you gave the statistics about the countries that have women presidents or prime ministers that are doing much better, and they are doing much better. The first thing is that because the scales are tilted against women, you find that women have to work 3 times as hard to become a president. And so the women that find themselves in leadership positions, first-class pedigree. because you can't wing it. But the most important thing that I think women have going for them is that they build trust. And the trust can be seen from three legs of a triangle. The first thing is that the women leaders that have studied, they are their true authentic self. Yeah. And that's the first thing about trust, being your true authentic self. If you fake it, it comes true very quickly. You may think you're deceiving people, but they see through you. So you find many politicians who say things that they will do that they have no intention of doing, and they will make promises that they have no intention of keeping, and they give an impression with their reputation that their character cannot stand up to. But you find that the women build that trust by being their true authentic self. So if Angela Merkel says something, people think it is that something. I'll mention no names, but some other politicians, some other places say something, you have to look twice. And I think you get my meaning. The second wheel on the triangle of trust is the wheel of the rigor of logic. And that rigor of logic is got to do with painting what the rationale is. So if you have that rigor of logic and you can put things succinctly, clearly, without politician doublespeak, and I think maybe that's why a lot of women don't go into politics, because you have to learn the doublespeak. You have to learn how to say, I'm going left, when you're actually going right. And many women will just say the way it is, I'm going left. Like Margaret Thatcher said, this woman ain't going back anywhere. So, and it doesn't win them many friends, but that really is the rigor of logic that resonates with your followers. The last wheel really is the wheel of empathy. And maybe this is where women have a natural advantage, because by their nurturing nature, they are more empathetic. You see two women talking, they listen fully to each other. Try having a conversation with your husband. And I'm not saying all husbands, I mean, I don't do that. But they are not listening fully. They're distracted. And you say, okay, but what did I just say? You said, but you said it now, so you know what you said. And so it's not even interesting gisting with men, because they are first, they don't listen fully. They want to jump to solution. And what you want is empathy. The thing is that the people you visit your most distraction on are the people you withhold your most empathy from. And sometimes we do it to our children, especially women. And we ask, oh, what did you do about this child? If the child is bad, it's the mother's. But we were not there, we were distracted. So the three things that the women have is being their true authentic self, their solid rigor of logic, and their empathetic nature that make people want to follow them. These are the reasons why women do well in crisis. Because in crisis, you need your followers to trust you, and women build this trust.
Right. Thank you, Austin, for that. And Yimika, I'm going to come to you because, you know, a lot has been said about this empathy and the fact that women are more empathetic than men. And you told the story about this WhatsApp group that you set up when the crisis first broke, and the reaction that you had within the organization to that. Do you want to share that?
So first of all, I didn't even think twice about it. For me, it was more about knowing where people are and how they're faring, particularly as the news was coming out that more and more people were getting it. And particularly because we started off the office on a 50-50 and then shifted the number of people. So the less people there were in the office, the more concerned I was that I didn't know what was going on. So just simply sent a message out to a few people to say, set up your WhatsApp group for your team. And I did one as well. And do a check-in. You know, I labeled it COVID-19 check-in. And the first time I did it, the first time I sent out the messages, you know, the interesting thing was everybody responded immediately on the first day, second day, third day. I think it was on the fourth day. And I'd given a deadline saying, I need to know by 12, otherwise I'll come haunting you. So everyone complied. And on the fourth or fifth day, I noticed one person hadn't. So I put a person's name and I put question mark as in, you know, and still an hour later, he hadn't. So I called and he panicked and said, I'm fine. I just have been so busy on the field. You know, I said, well, you know, you panicked us because nobody knew what was going on with you. And later on, I think that person has spoken to others to say, did you know that Yimika called me? Which I did naturally. I wasn't trying to score brownie points, or it was just for my peace of mind to know that everyone's okay. And the following day, there was, everyone came in pretty early because there was this, oh gosh, if you don't, she's going to call you. She's going to be monitoring you to know how you're feeling. I think it's, the reaction was for me, it was very good because it showed, I had personal messages coming back saying thank you. And I said, thank you for what? Oh, for checking up on us. And I said, well, if I didn't, remember that one thing I always say in the office to people is we spend more hours with people at work than at home. I can use myself as an example. I get home at 8 or 8:30, have dinner, and I fall asleep. That's it. And the next morning, I'm back at work. So what I'll call my alive hours, when I'm really awake, are with non-family members, with my colleagues at work. So they're very important to my life, literally. And I think it's very important to just check on people. So this is what we did during the season. And a lot of other leaders in my company did the same thing with their teams.
Well, were all the other leaders women? And was that because they followed you?
Not all. So we have two out of 7 are women on our leadership team. So not all are women, but everyone did what they needed to do.
Right. So Nneka, I'm going to bring you in here because you work in a sort of typically male-dominated tech sector, which is tech. So I'm curious to know how you've sort of experienced this with either your clients or within your organization, just whether or not you see that women act differently and potentially have a better way of dealing in a crisis. Nneka?
Yes, can you hear me now? Yes, that is true. Yes, the tech industry is a very heavily male-dominated industry. But one thing I would like to say, and I'd like to draw out from my experience over the years, is that we complement our men colleagues. You see, and one thing that has always been in the fore of my mind as I have ascended the career ladder was that I wasn't there to compete with a man. I wasn't there to be a man. I was there to be myself and bring my authentic self to my job. I was just as technically able, and when I would sit around and chat with my male counterparts, even till today on the board, in the boardroom, and when I say what value, and the things they add, the things they talk about are those softer things which we bring in addition to the more technical things in terms of strategy or in terms of all the corporate stuff, the governance and all that sort of thing. We bring over and beyond. As Austin has just said, I mean, for women, we have to work twice as hard. And I found that I did have to work twice as hard, which wasn't, it was innate, but then I became twice as good. You see, there is a reward there. We talk about people, we talk about, everybody here has talked about commitment. You see, and I found that in my career, in my team leadership, what I have done is focus on commitment as a stronger currency to compliance. You walk into work, you look sideways, you look at your teams, you nurture your teams, you grow your teams. You know how to lead from the front, set the agenda from the front, but you also know when to lead from the side, because you are only as good as your followership. You see, I have been heavily scrutinized in my career, but that has only made me better at what I do and made me realize and understand that there is a place for female leadership. There is a place for contributing to the corporate objectives. In your introduction to me, you said to me that I was the first Black woman to sit on the board of a multinational tech company. By dint of that fact, my biggest advocates have been men. You see, so this is not Austin, this is to you here. This is not an anti-men thing at all. It's just understanding the value that women add. Now, I would situate that in Nigeria, a country like Nigeria that has a greater female population, but has a less proportionate proportion of women in leadership. We are missing a trick here. We are, in terms of what women can bring to the table. COVID has exposed that, but it hasn't exposed anything we do not know. It has just brought that to the fore of how women are leading, you know.
Right. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I actually think Austin said that we work 3 times, not 2 times as hard. Just note that. But Nneka, let me bring you in here. Because you've said on an earlier conversation that, you know, this is definitely not a gender issue. It's not about women. And as somebody who's, you know, also, I guess, in a man's world, run a successful business for a very, very long time, which in itself is an achievement. Do you believe that women contribute something differently to men, and that shouldn't be dismissed? Nneka, are you with us?
I'm here. Forgot to unmute. Nobody who is adding value, nothing anybody adds of value should ever be dismissed, whether man or woman. I don't like the gender narrative. I prefer a narrative of competence. I prefer a narrative of capacity. I prefer a narrative where it's what I have to offer and I bring to the table in terms of value that we have a conversation around. I happen to be a woman. Yes, that's just, it has to be just by the way. But, you know, the social and cultural construct that says that women have particular roles and they should be in particular roles has created an unconscious bias that puts women in certain types of positions. Now, what we're seeing is that because people are now opening up and women are taking up positions, it's like there's some magic thing that has happened. Women have always been competent. Women have always had competencies. Women have always added value. They just didn't get the chance to show that they could. So now that they can, for me, it's the man who allows a woman is a very, very strong man who himself has evolved. His ego won't get in the way. So for me, it's women have a lot to offer. Women have something that I find unexplainable, but I think Austin put it beautifully. Women bring empathy, they bring heart, they bring love, they bring authenticity. And when something is real, that you are not faking, it's very difficult for it not to shine. Yes, we work twice as hard, but in the end, we shine because we work twice as hard, or I think Austin said 3 times as hard. But the point is we shine, and we shine a light to all the other girls who have read silly books that have told them to wait for a knight in shining armor or Prince Charming to come and rescue them, which is the social construct we all grew up with. So even our mindset is not even thinking of the possibilities of us being more than that, unless you have very strong parents who give you direction and say, you know, you can be whoever you choose to be. So who do you choose to be? And for me, it always has to be about who you choose to be. You're human, and we have to look at everybody from the narrative of humanity, where we carry both male and female tendencies. And whichever one evolves within us, and whichever situation calls for what is supposedly termed a male perspective or a female perspective, it comes out to deal with the situation. So you find there are women who are called women like men, and to say it in Yoruba, a woman that behaves like a man. For me, it's what emotions or what emotional state did I need to be in at that time to deal with the crisis or the problem or the situation that I had at that time. And so therefore, I will address it accordingly. If it requires empathy, I will deal with it with empathy. If it requires firmness, I will deal with it in a firm way. So for me, gender, we need to stop this gender thing. Women have so much to give and so much to offer. And men,
absolutely,
open up.
Did you hear that?
I'm very passionate about this. I'm jumping out of my chair talking about this.
There's a lot of passion there. But let's just take a quick segue to another poll now. So can we launch the next poll? So you should be seeing a question come up, which is about how has the crisis presented a leadership challenge to you, with 3 options. And then we're going to come back and talk quickly about innovating during a crisis. And then we'll go to questions. I can see a number of people have put their hands up, which is not how we're doing questions. You need to type into the, right, so can everyone see the poll? Because I am not seeing it. Right, okay, so how has the crisis presented a leadership challenge to you? I'm going to close the polling now, unless you want to quickly vote. This has been a lower response rate, but I'm going to close it now so I can read out the results. But okay, and I'm going to share the results with everybody now. So in response, you can see that the crisis has been negligible to some who are in leadership. So I assume these are people who are naturally good at operating under crisis. It's been moderate to 40%, and it's been significant to a bigger share of people. So it's interesting that, you know, for people who are, I guess, naturally entrepreneurial or innovative, they haven't been as well affected. So I'm going to move on to the next set of questions, which I just want to explore a little bit about innovation, because I think a lot of people, when we hear the word innovation, we think about tech innovation. And that's not necessarily what we mean. And innovating is really just a way of us doing things differently. And if there is a time to do things differently, it's now. So Austin, let me just bring you in on this. How do you define innovation? And can you give an example of how you've innovated in your business during this time? I mean, you've mentioned the way you've sort of, you know, transferred onto phones, but it'd be interesting to know how you define innovation.
Thanks indeed, Moky. I think that people generally attach innovation to technology, and innovation is much more than products or innovating services. It's also about systems, it's about processes, but more importantly, it's about attitudes, which is there in the mind. Radical innovation, it involves attuning yourself to see before anybody else, to see beyond anybody else, and to see more than anybody else. And you take this foresight to get ahead of the curve. But then again, innovation could be as simple as matching pent-up demand with idling assets. The biggest innovation have been as simple as that. Take Uber. Uber matched the pent-up demand of people looking for transportation with idling assets of people's cars that were parked at their workplace or home. Take Airbnb. Airbnb matched the pent-up demand for people for hospitality, for hotel rooms, with people whose homes are empty because they themselves are on holiday. And if you consistently and iteratively innovate, you get into a groove. You get into a groove where, with any leveling of the playing field, such as this pandemic, you go into the deeper zone of transformation. For example, Zoom. Who knew about a Zoom call 3 months ago? But today, it's almost taken over our lives. I mean, some people's spouses have to check on them to see whether they are still alive because they've been in the room doing Zoom since morning. And Amazon has done the same. In fact, innovation can also be from adjacencies. Amazon sells things, but to sell something, you have to deliver it. And Amazon has gone deeply into the delivery business such that they can deliver to you if you're on Prime, latest next. And they're doing better than even the courier companies. But I'll give you an example in our environment. So there's a lady that I know that rents out mobile toilets to events. And when the pandemic hit, there were no events. So she had all her mobile toilets sitting in parking lots. But she thought outside the box. What did she do? She approached all the centers where they were putting these temporary hospitals. the NCDC and offered her mobile toilets to them on long-term lease. Guess what? They were looking for mobile toilets, but she was the first to see that need, and she was the first to catch it. So at the end of the day, innovation should not be to be thought about as just belonging to technology people. Innovation can be as simple as matching pent-up demand to idling assets.
Austin, thank you for that. And I want to bring Yimika in now, because you work in an organization that it's a traditional business in that you're grappling with issues of distribution and manufacturing. So how have you been able to transform your business? Because one of the things you said was that you've lost 70% of your revenue because of COVID. So how are you able to transform the business for sustainability so that you keep earning and you keep your workforce there? What are you doing?
So first of all, we almost lost 70%. If we weren't quick on our feet to think through and find solutions, we would have lost 70%. I'm not saying we picked it all up, but at least we didn't have a 70% loss so far. Thank God. So, I mean, many things, but I think for me, the two that come to mind immediately will be on the sales side, because that's where this change in mindset was most important. Sales team were extremely quick at reacting to this. Again, I said our business is a global business, and China was a good learning for us. But unfortunately, China and most other parts of the world are what we call modern trade markets, where people go into supermarkets and people do e-commerce. So people are ordering things online and so on and so forth. That isn't something we do here. We here like to get our handbags, get on a bus, and go to the market to shop. We don't like things we don't see. We want to see what we're buying. That's very traditional here. So we do traditional marketing. So the team did many things. Some I may not want to share here because, again, these are trade secrets, but some simple things. I use the word telesales. They came up with flyers, of our products and sent out on WhatsApp. Became a big tool. So the teams came up with WhatsApp telesales messages, from each location, giving telephone numbers and putting products on WhatsApp to say, call me, I'll come and deliver to you at home. I'll come and deliver to you in your neighborhood. So vans were going into neighborhoods, taking permission to go into estates, to sell to people door to door, because people weren't going to the markets. And I'll tell a fun story here. My sister reminded me. So I decided to check all of these flyers. So these e-flyers had been sent almost across the country from 72 different teams, telling them the nearest location. And I picked one close to my home. And I picked the number and I called and said, I want to buy 5 cartons of hot chocolate. And when can I get it? And he said, oh, you can get it today or tomorrow. You tell me when you want it. I said, oh, this is good. But they didn't know who was calling. He didn't know who was calling. Then he said, what's your name? And I said, well, my name is irrelevant. Let me just tell you my address and you can deliver it. And he said, no, your name is important, because to come to you, I need to know who I'm selling to. I need to raise an invoice. And he went through the whole protocol. And I thought, okay, let me stop playing with this guy, because he'd done a very good job. I said, my name is Yimika Adeboye. You could hear the penny drop. And he said, Yimika Adeboye as an MD. I said, no, Yimika Adeboye as an employee of Cadbury. Another sort of like 2 seconds of silence. And I said, don't worry, I was just testing to see if the line works. I wanted to be sure that when a customer calls you, because you've never done this before, this was innovation from you. If a customer calls you, they get the goods. And for me, it was a big, to the team, because they thought of this idea and they're following through and they're making sure it works. It's very easy to do these things and then not follow through, particularly when, there are movement restrictions. There's so many things that you have to go through to make sure that you service a customer. This route is not your normal route for sales. So we've had to think out of the box. Sorry, you were going to ask?
No. I actually wanted, because I'm very conscious, I want to come to questions in a minute, but I want to quickly ask Nneka, because you transformed quickly your business to start producing not garments and clothing, but actual, face masks and stuff. Just tell me quickly, how easy was it for you to do that? Nneka, you might be on mute.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello? Yeah. Yes, I heard you.
I hear you.
It wasn't easy, but it was about making garments. We're already making garments. This was just a different type of garment. So the first thing was to see what was the process? Where would the materials come from? Who did we need to make samples? The process was a 5 or 6 step thing. Make the pattern, cut it, make the sample, get all that done. Now test the fabric. Was it the right quality? Was it going to do what we wanted it to do? Before I threw my whole weight behind it. But then we needed to take out about 30 specialist machines that we use in the other lines of production to replace them with straight stitch sewing machines. And that took the energy of everybody that worked in that factory to lift all those machines, move them to another floor, and reset the whole place up. So it took us about 7 days, really. We had to get an electrician in. I think for me it was about the will to do it. They showing the team what was possible, and they all put their weight behind it. And in less than a week, we were set up and we were running. Less than a week.
Wow. Amazing. Congratulations. Oh, well done, as they say in Nigeria. And Nneka, because you work in the tech sector, I'm curious to know the kind of clients that you have. What were the kind of innovations, the digital innovations or tech innovations that you were seeing clients want to implement? What were the things that were happening in the UK in response to this crisis?
The response to the crisis was that most of the clients, COVID presented an opportunity to demonstrate that people have to think very differently in the crisis. And in terms of thinking more creatively and more innovatively. And that innovation is not necessarily the preserve of leaders. Leaders have to change their behavior and the cultural makeup of their organizations in order to foster innovation. Listen to your staff. Your staff know your pain points. Communicate with them in terms of where you see yourself going during the crisis and post-crisis. Begin to ignite those thoughts within your workforce, and then begin and understand exactly what it is you want from people. People begin to think creatively. Now, in terms of tech, you see this crisis or this pandemic has happened during the 4th digital revolution. It would be remiss of me not to talk about tech and situating tech in Nigeria. Nigeria has the largest density of millennials, another fertile population group that are engaged socially, social media, technologically, and this is a rallying cry for Nigeria to begin to think of innovative ways of doing stuff. I was speaking to a proprietress of a school this afternoon, and she said to me, she says, listen, we've now had to close down our schools and we now have to move to mobile technologies. I was on a course last week and I was on a course this week, and these are for small to medium-sized businesses that have very low margins. People are thinking up ways of using the devices, the local devices we have in Nigeria to leapfrog that advance in technology. So it's important, and Nigeria, I believe, can begin to, not just for the big corporates, but for the smaller, the medium, and even the small businesses, begin to enable themselves using clever technology and thinking innovatively.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go now to some questions, and please continue to put your questions and state which panelist you want to answer them. And I will read them out and attribute them to you. So the first question we've got is from Joy Egolom, who is from Nigerian Breweries. And she's asking you, Yimika, you were coincidentally her finance director when she was at NBC. But anyway, she's asking, do you believe that you have an advantage over your male peers in managing crises, especially at this time? Question for Yimika.
No, I don't think so. I think management and leadership are two different things. People have their styles. As a CFO, I had worked with 8 CEOs who had different styles of leadership, all male. So I can't say, oh, I would have had an advantage, because I've seen people who were CEOs who probably did things that today I emulate because I like what they did, and it worked well when they were leading the team then. So I wouldn't say being a woman has had given me that advantage. In I think it's more who you are as a personality.
Okay.
I think I said, I'm not sure the gender thing really gives you that advantage. It makes you, I think it makes you a stronger and a tougher person in terms of managing an entity. But it does beyond that. I don't think, you know, your style, it determines your style.
Okay, all right. So I've got a question, and I'm choosing this one because it's from the CEO of the Zambia Institute of Banking and Finance. So this is from Victoria Mumba, and her question is not directed to anybody. So have a listen and then see who feels they're best placed to answer it. Her question is, what's the implication on female leadership of this statement? Leadership is gender neutral. And so her question is, how should females position themselves for leadership from a competitive rather than a sentimental point of view? Who wants to take that? Austin, is this something you can answer? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm outgone and outnumbered. So I volunteered before I'm shot. I think that sometimes people think that women put themselves out as being, how will I put it, entitled because they are women. And that is actually not generally true. We've been discussing through the seminar to see that they work 3 times as hard, they're 3 times as good. But it comes out in that manner because of their emotional way of expressing. If they're fairly passed over, it comes as if you are being entitled. No, you are complaining loudly about a very loud injustice. Let me put it this way. If I were a woman, one, I will keep my hands raised. I will explain this. Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook went to give a talk, and she finished and she said, I'll take questions. Then she said, I'll take 2 more questions. There was a young lady that went to Cheryl's office and she was complaining bitterly. So Cheryl asked, what happened? She said, well, you said you would take 2 more questions. And you took the 2 more questions and I put my hands down. But then you took more questions and all the questions went to the men. So what had happened there? Curiously, when she said 2 more questions, the men kept their hands up and the women put their hands down because they are more following of protocols. And she went on asking questions, but it was only the men that had their hands up and they were the ones that got the opportunity. So keep your hands up. It's not your job to keep it down. Number 2, you cannot get the corner office by sitting at the side of the table. I mean, Yimika is sitting at the corner office. But I don't think that she did that by going to the boardroom for meetings and sitting at the side of the table. No. You know what you can contribute. Sit at the table and contribute what you have, which, as Nneka has said, working twice as hard makes you twice as good. I think it's 3 times though. 4, if you have worked hard, you don't need to explain your success outside yourself. You know, and I'll give you an example. Serena Williams, it's explained that her father trained her, and that's why she's a tennis champion. But there's so many people whose father trained them too. And if you look at Serena and follow her growing up, when she was about 13, a reporter went to interview her and asked her, which tennis great do you want to be like? 13 years old, she said, no. I want to be the greatest so that other people want to be like me. Then you can see what is the more important factor in her greatness, the innate feeling and passion or the training by the dad. And the last one, 4, you are not a dollar bill. Sometimes because women's success is not directly correlated to their likability, unlike men, men's success is directly correlated to their likability. A woman gets ahead and people are saying, oh, she's a tough boss. Listen, do your best. Yours is to deliver, but you are not a dollar bill that is liked by everybody. So don't try to be a dollar bill. And I think that these are the things. The last one is that women, now is the time for women, because they take their feet off the accelerator when they are in the mind of going to get married. They don't take strategic roles. They step back, or when they want to have children. And the reason is because they physically have to go through some changes that makes it difficult to go somewhere and compete. But with this situation, and the situation is never going back to normal, it's part of our work culture. They can combine the two and they can work from home and have the children and do all that. So I think that women are very well placed to thrive and to progress through this pandemic.
Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Austin, because I want to take more questions. But I'm going to tell people quickly, Austin did an excellent talk at the WIMBIZ conference, and his speech is online on YouTube. So if you Google him and WIMBIZ, you'll find that talk, because he talks a lot about these issues. So I'm going to go now to Babalola Egbedina. And he asked an interesting question, and he didn't say who he wanted to ask, but I'm going to direct this one at Nneka, because I think you might probably understand this one best. But his question is, what are the ways to improve the work ethics of the Nigerian worker post-COVID-19, even when before this time, this had not been okay? So Nneka, I'm giving this to you because you talked about, how you didn't have to incentivize your workers to come back because you had fed them, So curious about your thoughts on this one. How do you improve the work ethics of a Nigerian worker post-COVID-19, even though it had not been great before?
I think it has to do with the culture of the organization and the importance that each organization places on its culture and what is important to it. So what are your values and what do you value, so to speak? So for us, we value people and we want to be able to add value to people so that they can add value back to us. So one of the things that we do is a lot of training. So we do emotional intelligence training, for example. You cannot have expectations of people of things they don't know if you don't explain to them or teach them. You have to recognize that our entire system has broken down, and a lot of people don't know what is right and what is wrong. And social media has even further confused them even more. So you find that you have to assume the role of teacher and teach people how to behave. Teach them your values, teach them integrity, teach them how to respect each other, teach them what it means to be responsible, what it means to be accountable, what it means to take ownership of something. It's not an easy thing to do, because to drive culture, for me, I've always wanted to drive culture as a competitive advantage, as one of the competitive advantages that we would have as a brand, because everything else can be copied, but it's very difficult to build a culture of accountability, a culture that's driven by values. When your culture is driven by a set of values, you don't have to worry, because people will do the things that they need to do when they should do them, at the time they should do them. It's expensive, it's time consuming, but then if you understand that the people at the bridge between your products and your customers, and an investment in your people is actually an investment in your products and in your services, then you will understand that you must invest in people. Your HR, you must have clear policy guidelines. You must have guidelines as to what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So nobody says, I don't know. You have to drive it. You have to have strong HR, because your HR is your gatekeeper. It has to be clear. Your employee manual has to be clear on what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Your leaders have to drive your values right through the organization, because there's no point in sitting up there saying it. Everybody has to believe it. You have to build a culture of trust. You have to build a culture that builds trust, and so people can believe in what you're doing, and by default join your team and want to be a part of something that is bigger than themselves and something that is much more purposeful.
Thank you, Nneka. And I hope, Babalola, that answered your question. I think it's about investing in people. So I don't know which organization you work for. So I want to direct this next question at Nneka. It's from a lady called Bimbola Wright. And her question is, it says, surveillance technology is gaining increasing prominence for the dual purpose of contact tracing for COVID and remote working. Is this a trend that is likely to be maintained? And what are the implications for the right of privacy for individuals? Nneka, that one's for you.
Okay. Yes. Yes. This is something that has started, and I think it's been trialed and tested at this point in time, in terms of trying to track trace as one of the measures to flatten the curve and also to reduce the incidence of COVID. It brings into question, and there's a massive debate, not just about privacy, but also the ethical use of that data, and also in terms of data and data being personally owned. Now, with it is still early days, and I know that the discussions are still very much in their infancy, but there's a growing social consciousness of how much data people can hold and how this data and how this track and trace is done. Is this anonymized? Do we use these on our mobile devices? What sort of information do we use? Because there's a first argument about talking about, okay, fine, this data will be anonymized and it's just looking at the demographic and tracing people. But then they also need to be able to send you a message. So how do they know that it's actually that individual? So now there are discussions, and I've been party to these discussions. The British Computer Society, of which I'm one of the committee members, released a really interesting thought leadership paper on this very issue and begging the ethical question. That is still in debate. And that is something that if indeed the benefits have to show that there is a social good, it is in the right interest of the citizens, before it will be allowed. So that is one thing that we're watching and we're waiting and seeing. There is a massive ethical debate and consciousness about that ongoing.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'm going to go to another question, which is from Seun Oni, and this is aimed at Yimika, and he's asking, it'll be interesting to get your insights on how you view leading through an ongoing business recovery repositioning pre-COVID-19, and then shifting immediately to the additional double shock impacts of COVID-19.
Sounds like a business
Yimika.
school case study.
Oh, and he didn't finish there, actually. He actually also asked about the immediate macroeconomic impact of the oil prices crisis, oil price crisis. I didn't add that bit in, but it's really just about the shift from how you were operating before to how you're having to operate now.
I think it's quite, that's a big question, and I don't think we have enough time to respond to that, but I'll just give some general. We are going through that. We're going through, because of the oil price, we've got exchange rate fluctuation. Almost every supplier is coming back to us telling us they have to adjust their prices. We've got to manufacture, we've got to sell, we've got to make money. There's a lot going on. And, one really has to see, for me, it's about having the team, sitting the team together. I'm a team person. I don't like to make decisions on my own, because I like ownership. And the only way you get ownership is to engage everyone in the conversation. So I do a lot of conversation with the team to say, look, these are all the variables playing on us. How do we handle this? And come up with all sorts of solutions on how we handle things. So there are a lot of things going on now, which you've identified that are impacting our business, especially in the manufacturing sector. I would say manufacturing sector because, I jokingly say this, but the bankers don't like this. You have money in the bank, or you're borrowing money from the bank. If they don't open, you're still paying your interest. If my goods are not bought on the shelf on a particular day, it's gone. That's lost sales. So in terms of how you manage your business and what you look at, you're looking at so many variables. I don't have an answer to give to you over this call. This webinar. I think it's something that's a lot more in depth than a response, 5-minute response or a 2-minute response. That's tough.
Okay, thank you for attempting it anyway. We've got a lot of questions. We've got about 8 minutes of time left. So I'm going to scoot through some and just pull out some. A lot of people have been asking for Bola Tinubu to speak and reminding me that I'm doing a terrible job as a moderator because I haven't asked her to speak. Just to let you know, Bola's not on the panel. She was introducing me, but she's not a panelist. But I will ask her a question, so Bola, be prepared at one stage. So let me also ask this question to, well, let me throw it out because again, this was not asked of anybody. They're asking, is there a difference between adaptation and innovation? And who feels they can answer that? Can we hear from maybe Austin, or who feels they can answer this, the difference between adaptation and innovation?
Well, adaptation is a choice. You have an impact, to be a response. And that response is in two ways. You do nothing, and if you do nothing, then you're just using hope as a strategy. You do nothing and hope that all will go well, or you'll not be harmed. Or you just concentrate on surviving. You know, let me just conserve, But between impact and response, there is a place of choice. And that choice is that powerful position where you can leapfrog into adaptation in a positive manner as to be innovation. So if we look at Zoom, why Zoom? There is Microsoft Teams, there is WebEx, and host of others. If you have explored all of them, you know that the most flexible is Zoom. So Zoom has gone beyond adaptation to let people have virtual meetings, to be the de facto to bring the live meeting as close as possible to the virtual meeting. You can have polling, as we've just done. You can have breakout rooms. You can have whiteboarding. So you can leapfrog from adaptation to innovation based on how you leverage the opportunities that the challenge of impact brings. And this challenge of COVID is big, but I can also tell you that there are a lot of people that have leapfrogged into a leadership position because they went beyond mere adaptation to leveraging into innovation and even to transformation. So it's a moving train. Either you stay on the tracks you are left behind, you stand in front of it and it will crush you, or you get on it and go for the ride.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Austin. So this is a question from Brian Mosandra. And I quite like it because it's relevant to the things we've been talking about the leadership skills of women. And it says, women have the capacity to be empathetic and able to build trust. These are the qualities that you were talking about, Austin. But how do you balance this and ensure that such good qualities are not taken advantage of? Who wants to answer this one? Because she didn't specify anybody, but I quite like the question. Nneka, okay, Nneka, over to you.
Trust and empathy. I think the truth is, in the real world, both somebody's going to take advantage. I think the way you respond to people when they break trust or when they take undue advantage of your empathy determines how what you will do, determines the actions you will take. So for me, how do I deal with people who break trust? I ask the questions I need to ask. Once you break trust, it's very hard to come back. It can be very hard to come back. And I make it quite clear that for me, trust is fundamental in all my relationships. I work with a team. I can't do this alone. And we must be able to trust each other. And once you break that trust, you put everybody in harm's way, more or less. So we have to have a deep conversation about what happened, why it happened. And if I can find a way back from it, we will find a way back from it. If I can't, well then whatever happens, whatever needs to happen will happen. For empathy, empathy is about my heart. I guard it jealously, even though I'm not afraid to be vulnerable. But again, if you cross the threshold, then the truth of the matter is, I don't have to work with you. I don't have to engage with you. I have a choice. I want to work with people who we can align, who we can have congruence, and we can do great things. So for me, it's important that there's trust. I want to be empathetic because I am naturally empathetic. I'm a woman, I'm a mother, and these are things that are unexplainable but come from me regardless. And I don't want people to take undue advantage of it, and I will deal with it the way I need to deal with it as the case arises.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm going to take one last question, and then we're going to move back to Bola, and she'll get a chance to speak again to those people who are concerned that she's been left out. So this question is from Catherine Bickersteth, and she's asking you, Yimika, will Cadbury review the range of its product lines in response to the economic impact of COVID? Yimika, that's for you.
So we are actually reviewing our product range anyway, COVID or no COVID. I mean, we're dealing in a smaller world. We're a snacking company, and we have a huge portfolio international worldwide. Everybody knows Oreos. Everybody knows all our Cadbury dairy products, all our chocolates. I think the biggest challenge we face in Nigeria is affordability of most of these products. And also, you know, one of the big things now with foreign exchange scarcity, a lot of these things are ingredients are not locally made. We try as much as possible to use what we can make locally with local ingredients, but also you have to import quite a lot. But yes, Catherine, we are looking at expanding our portfolio. COVID actually makes it more difficult in terms of FX to buy material, input materials. But one of the things we're doing actually is developing local suppliers for as many things as can be produced locally. That's one big thing we're championing as a company. And we have been able to make headway in some areas. There's quite a lot of ingredients that are not made here. The biggest challenge is to find people who can make it here. So I'm throwing it back at people out there to say, you know, ingredients made in Nigeria, very important for our business. But yes, Catherine, portfolio improvement coming soon. Watch this space.
This space. And on that, let's give people the opportunity to go watch other spaces because we have come to time. So personally, I'm going to thank everybody, every panelist that we spoke to. I found the comments and the things that you said were great learnings for me personally as a woman in this space. But I want to thank Austin for being brave enough to be the only man on this panel and to have some really good insights into leadership. To Nneka, I have to say congratulations and well done for being able to turn your business around and actually produce PPEs, which were much needed and still continue to be much needed. Yimika, that WhatsApp story and just caring a lot about your employees will always kind of remind me again, it's why women sometimes are probably better in these times, naturally empathetic. And Nneka, OBE, sitting in from London, thank you, and for kind of being that brave woman in a man's world. So on that note, I am going to hand over to Bola, our silent panelist, and over to you. And this is goodbye and thank you from Moky.
Thank you so much. We've had such a fantastic discussion on leadership today and what it takes to lead during a crisis. And I believe that there's strong evidence now that there's actual female leadership advantages during an organizational crisis. So I think that the key takeaway for me is this, and that in times of crisis, it's best to have capable male or female leaders who demonstrate great leadership attributes. So we're talking about being calm, being decisive, being big picture thinkers. But we also need them to demonstrate those common characteristics of successful female leaders that have been shown are what we need in the time of crisis. So as Austin put it so well, we were talking about empathy, and the phrase I liked the most was his rigor of logic, and of course, trust. So I want to say a special thank you on behalf of the Women Directors Development Committee of the IoD. I want to say a special thank you to our amazing moderator and panelists. I was keeping my eyes on the chat during the webinar, and one of the contributors, one of the participants put it so well, and I'm sorry that I didn't get your name, but he or she said that the contributions on this program reflect a high level of competence in the leadership corridor, and I don't think I could have put it better. So Nneka, Yimika, Austin, Moky, Nneka, Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your expertise. We're really grateful. I also want to thank everyone who joined us for today's webinar. You've made it a fantastic afternoon for us. And I'd like to invite the Director General of the IoD, Mr. Adenike, to provide his closing remarks. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I think the job has been done excellently well by Mrs. Tinubu. And as a matter of fact, she's the Vice Chairman of the Women Directors Committee of the Institute. I know she didn't tell anyone that. So I think I should tell you that now. And she's done a wonderful job here today. So I should also say a very big thank you to her too. And of course, I want to thank the President who has stayed here throughout this period. And I want to join her again to say thank you to everyone. I have followed this keenly, and I also followed all the charts, especially for me to measure the impact and the value we have been able to give to the participants. And I must say, of all the webinars we've had this season, this has been the most attended. I would say I'm too surprised. This has been the most attended. At a point we're hovering at about 500. And it's really wonderful to know. And the review we've had from the participants has been wonderful. And I think we need to do this again. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to, on behalf of the Institute, say thank you to everyone, especially to the participants who have stayed all through. It's not easy to keep the attention of so much people for this long. So a very big thank you to the panelists from all over the world. I say thank you for your support. And well, I can also advertise a little. Tomorrow we are doing something on the aviation industry. And I also want to invite everybody to join us. That is one of the sectors that is really, really badly hit by this pandemic. And we want to look at that area too. This is the Institute of Directors Nigeria. This is what we do. And we invite those that are here that are not members of the Institute to please join us. Thank you very much. I thank everyone, and I say, please continue to keep safe, and we pray that very soon, this too will be over. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.